Let's get to know Tina Nixon. We're going to start off with some rapid fire questions. What is your star sign?
Cancer.
Favourite meal and who cooks it?
Fish, my son.
What sort of music do you like?
Country and Western.
When you were at school, which teen group were you in?
Not really in any.
Are you anti-vax?
I am pro-vax.
Last TV show or movie you watched?
1883.
Favourite mode of transport?
My car.
Ever been arrested?
No.
What would you consider to be a good crime to be arrested for?
Probably a Robin Hood crime.
If you were running for government, which party would you be with?
Probably somewhere between National and ACT.
Okay, on to the serious questions now. Why are you running for Mayor of Masterton?
Masterton is the best place in the whole of New Zealand. It's got the best of everything here. And Masterton needs a mayor with some strength and courage to take it forward. We've got a lot of problems just in terms of our infrastructure and how it's holding up. So we need to ensure that the high growth is matched with good infrastructure investment. So from that perspective, I've been sitting on a number of different committees and groups for the council, like the district plan, river committees, some of the inter-council committees as well. So it gives me a very good understanding of the requirements and the challenges that we're facing. So I've stood clearly on a plank of we need better funding from government, or at least the government to agree to what they call unfunded mandates, and they need to start funding those. We in New Zealand, councils are some of the worst funded in the OECD, and that has to improve. And I was really heartened to hear Nanaia Mahuta the other day saying that she really thought that local government should be inside cabinet now. So I think there's a recognition from central government that we need our place at the table.
If you could wave a magic wand and change one thing in the region, what would it be?
We've still got a problem with the people who are least advantaged, and we've got to work on ways to lift their living standards. So they need to have all of those avenues into giving them a better opportunity in life.
And who are those least advantaged?
The people who struggle who have had bad education, who have been outside the system for a long time, maybe come from dysfunctional families as well. So that's a whole of community problem, which the council can play a part and work out some of those things that we can do to give them better access to the tools that they need to make good decisions, and also the good support to get them through life in a better way than they currently are.
If you win the election, what issue will you make your number one priority, and how do you plan to go about it?
Our number one priority for me is changing the funding paradigm. I'm part of the local government reform group here in the Wairarapa, which is the three councils having a look at just that issue. And it's very clear that funding is still our main issue. We're not going to be able to solve any of the rates problems unless we can address the funding issues from central government. We've had 14 separate pieces of legislation and rules come at us in the last 6 or 7 years, which have meant that we've had to either employ people or spend money to implement them. So that stuff has got to change, and so we need a greater awareness of the impacts of small communities of unfunded mandates. So I'm clearly on that path now. I'm anti-Three Waters for the same reason. That's a mandate. There's an expropriation of community assets without any compensation, and that can't continue, and we're going to lose our voice. So I'm here for a really strong voice for Masterton and the larger Wairarapa community, and I also want to see the three councils amalgamated.
What can the council do to help slow down or limit climate change?
This is another one where it's really difficult for us to do stuff unless we actually get the funding. And climate change, some of the mandated changes from government have come at us again without any funding. So that cost is coming back onto the ratepayers. We put out some stuff. We've actually got a climate change action plan, and some of the things that are in that people are really liking are things like organic waste collection. But I actually would like to see us support more education of people and what they can do individually individually. And sitting on the district plan, one of the things we've had under consideration and is likely to appear in the district plan is the ability for people to have tanks on their property and be mandated to have tanks on their properties if they're in subdivisions. And that's really just about water resilience. If there are any major issues with the water supply, but it's also that our people here really love gardening, and we think that our water use, which is a bit more than most of the average water use across New Zealand, is because people here are quite self-sustained, and so they're actually using the water supply to grow their own veggies. So in some respects, the water is actually being used positively. So those are some things. We've got an electrification of our own council fleet as well, which I support. I think we're applying ourselves to some of those issues. One of the critical issues for us, though, is water storage. And somewhere along the line we have to face that. We're one of 2 hotspots in the whole of New Zealand, and that means that climate change is going to come at us like a freight train, and we're already seeing hotter climate here than anywhere else, and that means that we have to address the issues of water storage. Basically, I think, firstly, probably for our survival as much as any economic drivers.
What is Masterton routinely lacking or neglecting that you hope to change?
Years ago, I was involved in a promotional campaign called My Masterton when I was working for the council, and it was largely responsible for the start of the urban drift into here. So since 2014, we've had about another 4,000 people arrive here. One of the premises of the whole campaign was to get people to love their place, and I think we need to revitalise that. I think after COVID, there's been a lot of anger and distress and depression about the world, and yet we actually live in the best place in New Zealand. And so I'd like to see another campaign where we can reconnect our population with our place and make people love it again. And I think that way we'll get more positive feeling and more passion that will come with lots of new ideas of how we can make it an even better place.
Where do you want the community event centre, and what should it include?
The Community Event Centre has probably been one of the biggest challenges I've had in life, and I've been a prison social worker and also worked in Christchurch post the earthquakes. The Civic Centre is now in review in terms of the process and what we've learnt from it, and so that the new council can go ahead with some really good information as to why we made the decisions that we did. And I still think there's a case for it being sited close to the rec centre, which is what the last thing we were looking at, because the rec centre itself needs a lot of work. The Memorial Stadium probably needs done up, and it makes sense to make a hub for young families, which we're getting a lot more of here, so that there's everything in the one area. However, there's also another proposal on the table from the theatre groups here to build a theatre complex. So my first task as a mayor will be to bring all of the players together in one room and sit down and look at what are the projects that we think we can do over what time frame, and sequence them and make sure that we don't jump over each other in terms of external funding for the projects. From that's literally the job that I want to do in the first week. So that'll include all of the people who own property, there's a couple of organisations that own large tracts of property, and then there is the large sort of community trusts as well, and some key council members, and sit down in a round table way, put some bones around it, bring it back to council, flesh it out a bit more, do some more consultation, and take what we think would be a grand plan for the whole of the Masterton. And it may be something that we can't just do overnight. It's really expensive, and we know that now, but there's some good ideas on the table, and the community needs those facilities, so we need to work out how we're going to do them, when we're going to do them, and how we're going to finance them.
Is there anything else you'd like to say on the upcoming elections?
No, I wish everyone the best. I think it's sad that we haven't got a race for the Māori ward. That being said, that the candidate that is in that role is really competent, and is a woman who's come from a background of good governance across a number of different organisations. So I'm happy with the calibre of the candidate. I'm just surprised that we didn't get more than one, and I would have really liked to have seen some youth, and that's the real issue for us. We don't pay enough for young people to go, okay, I'm going to go out and do some civic stuff for a few years and give up my job. You wouldn't do that for $34,000 a year, and that's the problem. And the workload is really much more than what a lot of people think. This is not a 20-hour job. I estimate that it's around 25 to 30 hours a week for me.